Being a convicted felon, you don't know what it's like until you know what it's like. It's not an easy thing to be a convicted felon, and it has a lot of hurdles and obstacles. And even after you're released from probation or parole, you still have to live a life where you're constantly having to explain to people what it is and what you did, no matter how far and how vast the separation is from the time that you did the said crime to the time that you are now being asked about the said crime. And often when people ask you, so can you give us an explanation on what you was thinking about when you committed this crime, or what you were going through when you committed this crime? You're sitting there and you're thinking to yourself, and I'm telling you from personal experience, and even recently as I've applied for a job that requires a state license in the state of Louisiana, having to answer an absolutely absurd question to the licensing board and to the lady who I've been dealing with. And I'm also showing mercy to this lady because she's absolutely just out of line on how much information she is pushing me for. It's ridiculous. And I've given her all the information. I've provided her with the arrest record. I've provided her with fingerprints. I've provided her with the fact that I had a TWIT card and a passport, but she still wanted information saying that I was released from parole. I told her I vote in Louisiana. You can't vote unless you've been released from paper for 10 years to be able to start voting again, or whatever the time period is. And so now she wants a written statement per crime explaining what it is that I did during that crime. And I'm thinking to myself, some of these are crimes that I committed occurred when I was 17 years old, 17, 18, 19 years old. I don't remember everything I was thinking. I was an idiot. I was a young kid. I was a fool. But you're pestering me for information that I'm having a hard time recollecting, because sometimes I'll give them a 2-page sentence. You know what I mean? Just a two-line sentence. That's it, because that's all I can come up with. But sometimes they want more. It's like they want 2 pages, and I can't deliver 2 pages because I don't want to deliver 2 pages about something I did when I was a teenager. And so here it is in my late 40s, trying to get a job and still having to deal with the things. There are consequences. Though I'm released, there are still consequences for being a convicted felon. You still have to answer these questions. Have you been convicted of a felony when you're applying for a job like I'm doing now? And I haven't made a penny on this job. I'm hundreds of dollars in that I've spent trying to get this job. And that's not counting all the hours I spent filling out paperwork and traveling here and there to get the paperwork that they're asking for me to get this state license. And I still haven't made a penny. I haven't even got approved. I don't even know if I'm being approved. I think at this point I am, because I provided all the documentation that's needed. But it's a long stretch, and you're probably going through the same thing. You're probably sitting there watching this video and you're thinking, I'm a convicted felon, or I know somebody who's a convicted felon that I love and care for, whether it's a son, even a daughter, a spouse, a sibling, or a friend. You're thinking to yourself, man, this is hard. It should be easier for someone to get a job. I was also recently, as a convicted felon, talking to someone who I was having a discussion with, and we weren't necessarily agreeing on what we were talking about. And at no point in the conversation did I think that anything was ever going to escalate to anything physical. But the reality was, I was standing here having a disagreement with somebody who I knew was armed, legally armed, and I wasn't. So if someone, and I'm not saying it would have happened in this instance, but what if you have a disagreement with someone and they're armed, and you as a convicted felon, you don't have no way to arm yourself because it's a crime to be a convicted felon and be armed? At what point is enough enough? I have been home from prison for 20 years. 20 years. And if you're watching this, you may have been home for 20 months or more than 20 years. Or you may have not had a felony, you may not have ever been to prison. You may just be someone who has just got a felony, got convicted, got probation, got off probation, and you're still dealing with the consequences of being a felon. I knew people who never been to prison, but they had a felony arrest and a felony conviction, And it was hard for them, maybe not as equally as hard as someone who'd been to prison, but just as hard and pretty close. Because the fact is, they just looked at the fact that it says felon. And some people have been convicted of felon on drug offenses from when they were teenagers. And I know people who went into their 60s still having to deal with it. And it's absolutely ridiculous and absurd. At what point should the state or should the federal government say that these people are paid in full? It is a conspiracy. They want to keep us, under lock and key. They want to keep control over us. And criminals, if you were a convicted felon, you committed your crime. But at what point have you completed your sentence? Have you served your sentence? I remember I was doing ministry work in the upper ninth ward of New Orleans. And me and my wife spent, but I worked a job. I went to school. My wife worked a job, went to school, and we still was putting, during the week, we were putting 5 and 6 hours in of ministry work per day on top of a job and going to school. We were putting 5 and 6 hours a day. That wasn't counting the weekends when we weren't working or going to school, and we still had papers to fill in for school, and we still might, sometimes the job we had, I did roofing work and my wife did security work, and sometimes we would needed to do, odds and ends. And so we had to work on the weekends, but mostly we went to church and we were doing ministry work. But I remember the school around the corner needed people to go help, and we had to fill out an application, and everybody got accepted except me. That was part of the church plant in the ninth ward. I couldn't get in because I was convicted of a felony and I had been released from prison, so they denied me. And at this point, I was not on probation or parole, but I had still only been home at this point for, probably at the time we're doing a church plant in the ninth ward, I'd probably been home for 3 or 4 years. And so I was still only home for less than 5 years. And so I was like, I didn't agree with it. It broke my heart. It made me sad because I really wanted to help the school kids and the teachers in that school. And I couldn't get in to the premises because of my felony record. And I wasn't going to do any harm to any of them kids. I haven't harmed a kid in my entire life. I think it's absolutely, it's disgusting. It's reprehensible. I can't even put words on it when people hurt children. As a Christian man, the Bible says if you hurt one of these, it's better to tie a millstone around your neck and throw yourself into the ocean. That's hard to imagine or hard to fathom, but I couldn't get into school because I was a felon. And my felonies are, I have drug offenses. And you want to hear something that's absurd? I have drug charges on my jacket, and I have never had an issue where I was addicted to drugs ever in my life. I never sold drugs. I tried selling drugs when I was a teenager with my friends, and that's another story. When we were young, I put money in. I always had a job. I put money into the pot to sell narcotics. A friend of mine who had a lot of connects, he bought a bunch of drugs, and we chopped it up at my house and we broke it up in baggies, and it was a lot of work. And I'm like, I don't feel like doing this. He's like, yeah, you got to do this. And then next thing you know, I got people showing up at my house at 2 and 3 a.m. and it's at my mom's house. And I'm like, hold up, man. I said, man, don't come knocking on my door at 2 or 3 in the morning. I drove him out of there. I was mad. I was like, man, don't come knocking at my house at no 2 a.m. throwing rocks at my window. And the dope fiends told my partner who I was in business with, and he come talk to me. He said, say, Milt. He said, man, what you doing, man? Why you drove them people away, man? You were supposed to sell them something. I said, man, don't nobody come to my house at no 2 or 3 in the morning. I said, that ain't gonna ride. He said, well, that's how it works. I said, it ain't gonna work like that here, And so I was in the drug game for like 2 weeks, and we had an agreement. Once we sold everything we bought and split the cash, I was out. And he met me. He gave me all my money. No questions asked, and I never did it again. That was it. Just wasn't for me. I'd rather go stick something up. That's the way I was. I'd rather go, I like the adrenaline and I like the high of going, get down. Let me get that with you. You know what I mean? 15 minutes, total job done. I didn't like the monotony and the time that it took to be a successful drug dealer. That wasn't for me. But I got caught with drugs because, once again, I jacked somebody from it, and then I was going to get rid of them to somebody else. I wasn't going to, slang them piece by piece, but I was jacking people from stuff, and then I would get people who I knew, and they would just get it from me for a discount, and they would do whatever they were going to do with it. And because I'm not a professional in the field by no stretch of the imagination. But here I am, as a convicted felon. And the last crime that I committed I was probably 21 years old. I was 21 years old the last time I committed a crime. And I'm still dealing with the consequences. It's not worth it. If you're watching this and you commit crime, don't do it. Think about what you did. I'm sharing some deep, personal information in my life with you right now because I know I'm a changed man, but I'm still dealing with the consequences of my actions from being a young man. Sometimes it doesn't go away and you have to deal with it. So you have to, get your mind right. You got to be mentally strong, physically strong, spiritually strong, emotionally strong to deal with all the rejection. Financially, you got to get yourself in order because the rejection's coming. They're going to shut doors in your face that if you didn't have a felony would be opened. They're going to slam them right on your face and they're not going to lose no sleep about it. So you got to be strong to endure the difficult times, to keep your head on your shoulders, so to speak. You don't want to do nothing stupid. And that's what happens. A lot of dudes do stupid stuff. You got to course correct. You got to have foundational values in your life that can't be moved by nobody. In other words, for me, there are foundational values in my life that I tie to scripture that I ain't willing to break for nobody. It don't matter who. Doesn't matter who. So there's nobody. There are things that I abide by, and that's just the way I abide by. That's how I live my life. That's important to me. You know what I mean? And it took me exercising all my muscles, my emotional muscles, my spiritual muscles, my heart muscles. I need to do a better job with my physical muscles because they used to be big, but they ain't now. And I know a lot of people who watch my channel, not everybody, but a lot of people have been to prison or know somebody who has been there. So you're familiar with it in one form or fashion. You might be a correctional officer or somebody who was a correctional officer because ex-inmates and ex-correctional officers tend to do, a lot of work together once both of them leave the system. I've personally did ministry work with police officers who are friends and correctional officers. So, and they're my friends to this day. But, you just don't know, man, how your record is going to hold you down. Should you let your record hold you down? I don't think you should let your record hold you down, but does that mean you're not going to feel like it's holding you down? You're going to feel like that at times. It's going to be hard, and then there's life that comes at you. For me, I got a back injury. My career, I was satisfied doing what I was doing. I had finally got comfortable, after a decade, in the oil and gas field, trying to figure out what position I was going to be satisfied with until I retired. And I finally came to the conclusion that I was satisfied with just working the field. I was happy. That was going to be my place. I was making good money. I was good at what I did. You know what I mean? I was reliable, but I hurt my back. And my back still hurt to this day. It's actually gotten worse. My arm hurts because of it as we speaking. And so I can't go back and do that, unfortunately. I wish I could, but I can't. And so you just got to course correct even for that, even when you get taken off course. And that's just some thoughts I'm having right now. And this video is a little different than the other videos I do, if you watch my channel, I do a lot of unusual and unique crime and prison stories that I cover or topics. And right now, I'm just giving you a glimpse into my thoughts. What I'm thinking about is I'm trying to figure out what to do beside door dashing. And if you watch my videos for any amount of time, you can see that I share how a felon door dashes and what you can do. There's some videos on it in my channel. But I can't do that forever. That's not a solid, stable job. I need to find something else. I guess it is, but you gotta put in 10 hours a day doing it. And I don't think I'm willing to put 10 hours a day doing it. I wouldn't even be able to drop videos at that point, would I? But anyway, give me a like and subscribe. Thanks for watching the Pen and The Shank, the most unusual and unique crime and prison channel experience on YouTube. Share this video, hit the bell notification. Help me get this channel to the next level. We got a lot of good stuff coming.